One common way to set up a flight simulator is on two screens, where one screen is the instrument panel and the other is the out the window view. One downside to a setup like this is that it pretty much just becomes a dedicated simulator computer. It's hard to do a lot of normal computing stuff on a setup that looks like this, but depending on how you look at it, having a dedicated flight simulator computer could be a good thing too. If you do make a setup like this, the best way to do it is with the software Air Manager by the company Sim Innovations, running on a touchscreen. The fact that this is a touchscreen means all I have to do to flip a switch, for example, is touch it. I can press a button like the ones in the autopilot just by touching it, just like you would. Something that's traditionally difficult with touchscreens, though, is knobs and dials. It's a little bit hard to rotate them with your finger, and so a solution to that is what they call the Knobster. It's a single hardware knob. It's actually a dual knob like you'd find on a radio or a GPS with a push button in the middle. And if I want to control a knob on the panel, all I have to do is touch it, and it highlights in yellow. So I touch the COM2 tuning knob, it highlights in yellow. That means this knob has control over that, and I can tune a frequency here. Air Manager is compatible with all the major sim software on the market. Of course, we recommend X-Plane. But let's take a look at how it works, starting with how and what you want to purchase. To purchase Air Manager, we start at siminnovations.com and click on Buy. And what you want is Air Manager for desktop. Version 3 is the current version here, but version 4 is actually in late stage beta right now. And so by the time this video comes out, that's probably going to be the version. That's actually what I'm going to demonstrate here is the beta for version 4. But you can see it's 65 euros. You would click there, make the purchase just like you would really with any software that you buy online. And then what happens is this purchase gets tied to your user account at Sim Innovations. And when you download and install the software, you'll log into your account and that'll activate the full version of the software. And that's how any add-on panels that you buy work as well. Speaking of panels, then there's a good chance that you do want to get an add-on panel or two. So let's take a look at what's available. Click on panels up at the top here. There are community panels and premium panels. The community panels and instruments are the ones that are included with Air Manager that you'll get with the purchase of the Air Manager software. Premium panels cost a little bit extra, and we'll take a look at those in a second, but let's just see what community instruments are available. So these are all the panels that come with the software. You can see some of them are full panels, some of them are parts of panels, like here's a King Air engine panel. Here's a radio stack for a 737. Here are the primary instruments for a Cessna 152. More or less complete minus the radio stack 172 panel. And then down below that, there are the individual instruments, and there are 800 at the moment. You can filter this by aircraft. So you could take a look at Cessna 172, for example. And these are all the instruments that are available, included with the software for the Cessna 172. And you can see over on the right here which simulator they're compatible with. So this switch panel is only compatible with X-Plane, whereas this vertical speed indicator is compatible with X-Plane, Flight Simulator, and Prepared. And you don't see a Flight Sim 2020 icon here. That's because version 3 wasn't compatible with Flight Sim 2020. Version 4 is, and there are a lot of instruments in the version 4 beta at the moment that do support Flight Sim 2020. It's also worth noting, I think, that just because this is listed as a Cessna 172 instrument doesn't mean you're limited to using it with a 172. You can put this vertical speed indicator into any panel and it'll work just fine. So reviewing the instruments that are available here will give you kind of a sense of what you can do without purchasing a premium panel. But probably the most sort of plug and play way to use this is to get one of the premium panels. And if I go back here, there are a couple panels that you might be interested in. The 172 and Baron panels here, for example, match the X-Plane default layouts, and they also have the same functionality, which makes it really easy to just get up and running with that panel. They also include some variants that you can use for different GPS navigators, and they also work with certain mods and third-party versions, like the 172 and the Baron both include panel versions that work with the SimCoders Reality expansion packs. You might also consider the Garmin G5 or the Aspen EFD 1000. These are instruments built from scratch for Air Manager, and they're not 100% replicas, but they are very good. I'd say that the G5 has about 95% of the functionality of the real thing, and it's the best simulator G5 that's available at the moment. And you can add these instruments to any panel, the G5 or the Aspen. Finally, then, I recommend the Knobster, which is that single physical knob for controlling knobs and dials, and that's available under hardware here. You can see that's €90. It's a dual concentric knob with a push button like you'd have on a GPS, and that makes controlling those knobs in the sim a lot easier than trying to do it by touch or with the mouse. After you purchase Air Manager, you're given a link to the wiki page where you can download the software. There's lots of good documentation here, and Sim Innovations has some videos that walk you through the process too. So I'm not going to go into detail on how to install this, but there are basically 3 steps. You download the software, install it, and then you also have to install the flight simulator plugins that sit within the simulator and allow the Air Manager software to communicate with the simulator. When you first run the Air Manager software, you're prompted to enter your login information from the Sim Innovations site in order to activate your software and panel purchases. If you ever need to get back to the screen, like if you purchase panels later, you can just choose Air Manager and activate, and you can see my copy is already activated. You can also go to Air Manager and Orders and log in, and you'd be able to activate any products this way too. And actually, you can run Air Manager without ever activating it. It just runs in demo mode with only a really small number of instruments available to you, but you can connect it to your simulator and see how it works before you purchase. If you ever get stuck here, there's a help menu that can link you to the website, the forums, the manual, a set of frequently asked questions or to report bugs, and then these YouTube screencasts can be useful too. They have some tips for installing and for building instruments, building panels, things like that. It's worth checking out. So we're on the Home tab here now, which is where you're going to spend most of your time in Air Manager. And there are 2 things on this list over on the left. There's Air Manager and Knobster. Knobster just shows that I have a Knobster connected. And if you click on Air Manager, you get some of the program settings. The one that's most important here is input mode. If you're using a touchscreen, you want to make sure this is either set to touch or mouse and touch in order to be able to interact with touch. It's also worth being aware of automatic instruments snapping here. What that does is while you're moving instruments around the panel, it'll snap them in alignment with the edges of other instruments in your panel when you get them close to the edges. And so that can be useful when you want to do that, and it also can get in the way when you want to make real fine adjustments to the position of the instruments. So it's good to know that that setting is available. This list is also where your panels will appear. So let's add a panel. And to do that, we press the plus panel button, and we get a list of all the panels that are available. So some of the panels here are the premium panels that I've purchased. Others are the free panels that come with Air Manager. You also have the option to start with a blank panel if you want to. I'm going to choose a Baron panel. That's one of the premium panels. So I click on Baron. This one here is the premium panel. And we double click that. And now you can see all the variety of layouts that you can have for this particular panel. The full HD panel here is just a standard Baron panel that matches the one in X-Plane, except without a GPS, just 2 standard radios. GNS 530 is a closer match to the Baron that comes with X-Plane, and so we're going to go with that. There are also some options for GTN 750 that you would have to use Reality XP for. The GPSs in Air Manager are really just bezels to control the versions that are in the simulator. So what you'll actually end up doing is popping out the simulator GPS and placing it within the Air Manager bezel, which I'll show in a moment. But let's choose this GNS 530 panel. And we also want to make sure that we have it on the correct display. I happen to know that my touchscreen monitor is display 3. You can change this later, so it's not that important that you get it right here, except that if you choose a monitor with a different resolution than the one you want, like you can see I've got this 2560 by 1440 monitor, then it's not going to lay out correctly on the other monitors. But I'm going to put it on display 3 and choose Add. Okay, and now you can see Beechcraft Baron 58 panel is added to the list here, and you can see the layout of the panel in this window to the right of that. Additional settings for the panel are just below. I can rename it here. There are some options for starting the panel automatically when you load a certain aircraft in X-Plane. That can be useful. This is where you can choose what display the panel is on, and you can also manually resize and move your panel. And then there are these three checkboxes for locked, always on top, and click through. Locked will prevent you from accidentally moving the panel, so that's usually good to keep checked once you've got it positioned the way you want. Always on top will put it always on top of other windows, which generally you want. And click through is necessary if you have a GPS sitting behind the panel that you need to touch, like a GTN. For this panel, because the GNS isn't a touchscreen, it's not important, but if you are flying with a GTN, you do want click through enabled. Then I want to enable the Knobster for this panel. My background is set to transparent. That's important because that GNS 530 is just going to sit in a transparent cutout of the panel, so the background needs to be transparent for that to work. And then background mode is layout. That means it's going to use this background image for the Baron panel underneath all the instruments. So besides popping out the GPS and putting it in the panel, that's really it. We're good to go. If I want to display this panel and be able to use it and interact with it, you just press the light bulb here. And there it comes up on the screen. I can right-click on the panel then and close it. But let's say we want to make some modifications to this panel. I can click and drag instruments around, put them wherever I want. I can click and resize. If I want to delete an instrument, like say I don't have a DME in the panel, just right-click it and choose remove, and it's gone. Say I don't like this style of altimeter, the altimeter in my plane is different, I can remove this and I can add a new instrument in its place. So over here, if I expand this list, this is all the instruments that are in the panel. I can go plus instrument to add one. And let's search for altimeter. Now this list is again made up of all the instruments that I have available. So some of these are premium instruments, some of these are instruments that I created myself or modified in the case of these Piper Aero instruments. And others are the instruments that are included in Air Manager. So I can scroll through here and let's say I like the 172 SP altimeter, pretty standard altimeter. Double click it, there it is. And then I can resize it and drag it into its place. If I want to be more precise with the sizing and positioning, I can find that instrument in the list here. There it is. And these are the instrument settings. I can set a left and top position and a width and height. Some of these instruments also have some extra user properties that you can edit here. For example, if I choose the call sign plate, I can change the ID text. So November 1, 2, 3, Alpha Bravo, or whatever I like. And now when I run the panel, that's what shows up on the call sign plate. Okay, let's load up the sim and see this panel in action. All right, we're in X-Plane now, and I've got the Baron loaded up. I have a forward out the window view set that matches the correct perspective for how I'm sitting in my simulator. And you can see that this panel works now. If I press the battery switch, it flips it on and that comes live. I can turn on the avionics. Now the one thing that's missing here is the GPS, and that's because what you're looking at is my desktop background just through a transparent cutout in the panel. So what we need to do is pop out the X-Plane GPS and just place it in position in that hole in the panel. So to do that, we click on the GPS and it pops out, and then we click on this icon on the top right, and now I can click and drag it to the other screen. There's going to be some resizing involved here. I'm going to try to place it as closely on top here as I can. And now when I click on the panel, that'll go to the top, and that looks about right. I can make sure this always on top property is set now so that the GPS, the X-Plane GPS, stays in the background. And now I can use Air Manager to interact with this GPS. If I press the FMS knob on the GPS here, it lights up in yellow, and I can use the Knobster to control that knob. You can also do that with the Reality XP GPS. You can do that with the GNS series, and the GTN Air Manager includes some bezels for the GTN series, and really provides a great way to control the GPS without having to use the mouse. So this is a type of simulator setup that I really like for how easy and natural it is to fly. You don't need to use the keyboard or mouse for anything, which is great. And I think compared with a physical hardware setup, it's great because it's really flexible. I can swap in a 172 panel, I can bring in different avionics, and I'm not limited by the physical hardware that I have. That's the advantage of touchscreen and then that single Knobster. And I think this particular setup, despite not being an FAA approved setup, compares favorably with any FAA approved basic aviation training devices that I've flown. Air Manager allows you to display instrument panels on a second screen, ideally a touchscreen. The Knobster is a hardware knob used for controlling knobs and dials in Air Manager.